Brilliant, thank you ever so much for coming along and welcome to the event Feeding Bristol, Practical Steps to a Local Food Future. So it's great to have you all here, and today what we're going to be exploring are the following questions. So what would it look like to live in a city that could feed its citizens with healthy food produced sustainably and grown locally, and how should we be feeding Bristol? So no doubt many of you are going to have lots of contributions, I hope as well. But to help us answer that question, I'm joined today by Claire Rosling from Bristol Food Producers, Dr. Angela Raffle from Bristol Food Policy Council, Humphrey Lloyd from Edible Futures, Alice Marie Archer from the Bristol Fish Project, and last but not least we've got Phil Horton from the Better Food Company. And the community farm. Well, actually many of them have got many different hats, and so I'm sure they're going to tell you a bit about that when they talk. So we'll be hearing from them. So yeah, I guess really what we've asked them to talk about today from their different areas of expertise, and they've got a very wide and varied and long expertise from around the city in building a resilient local food system. So I'm really excited to hear what they've got to say. But what we've asked them to talk about is, what do they think Bristol would look like if we really scaled up food production? And also, what practical steps can they suggest to how we can achieve it? And how can we grow the market for local food? So we've only got an hour, so they've all been asked to do 7 minutes each. And so I will be quite a strict timekeeper, but there will also be time for asking questions as well. I need to introduce myself and do some housekeeping though before we kick off. So my name's Tracy Lewis. I'm part of Bristol Food Producers, part of the steering group, and helped to launch the new membership organisation to help scale up food production last year in Bristol. But Claire's going to be telling us lots about that. I've worked for many years for the Soil Association, working on a range of different development programmes around the southwest of England to help develop and scale up and support marketing of organic and local food and farming. Now currently I'm working on a very exciting food project with a local retailer, online retailer, Fresh Range, who are going to be supplying the Baines school food contract from the summer. So I'm working on that, and we're doing a launch tomorrow at 2 o'clock in the Travelling Barn, if anybody would like to come along to that also. So so I guess in terms of housekeeping, we just wanted to say that there is going to be some filming around the event and some photographs taken. So if you're not comfortable with that, or simply being on, it's not going to be television, is it? But, not for this event. But if you're not comfortable with that, then please do let us know, or just try and sort of sit watch screen it away. Also, we've got fire exit, there's toilets outside, and we've got the bar there if you want any refreshments during the talks. Okay, so please don't be offended if I keep you all strictly to time. I'll try and do it as nicely as possible, but we do want to ensure that everybody gets a chance to speak, and also we want to be ensure that there are, you've also got time for questions and comments. But we do have half an hour allocated at the end, so when we do finish, there'll be a time for you to, get drinks, have a network, and find out more about, what you've heard as well. So we hopefully, get good balance.
Hello. Okay, so as Tracy introduced, we're going to be talking about how can we scale up local food in Bristol. I'm not going to be doing so much of the visioning exercise. I'm going to leave it to these wonderful experts here. My job now, I'm going to introduce what Bristol Food Producers is and what we're doing, how we're trying to scale up local food in Bristol. So I don't know if you can really see it very well, but Bristol Food Producers is it's a cooperative producer-led umbrella organisation. So that's a bit of a mouthful, but basically we're all about creating a network of local producers with the aim of supporting and increasing local food production in Bristol. So this all started last year with a strategic Green Capital grant under the helm of the wonderful Bonnie Hewson that's sat here. And since then we now have over 30 members, and that includes growers, food producers, retailers, distributors, strategic business supporters, and also a lot of local food supporters like you guys here. So there's a real range of people involved. This is just a handful, which you can't see all of them. So how are we trying to help scale up local food in Bristol? Well, you need to start from the beginning, start from the roots up, I guess. And you can't, oh no, you can't see the top. This isn't going to work well, but in order to get successful businesses off the ground, you need to make sure they've got the right skills and training behind them to make them really succeed and get off to that good start. So our first sort of aim is to provide skills and enterprise support for producers around Bristol. I'll go into that in more depth in a little bit. So once you've got your more skilled and business savvy producers, you'll hopefully then create a greater demand for land for food production. So off the screen is we are trying to provide or proactively facilitate land matching across Bristol, so in the city itself, but also around Bristol where we can. The way that we're doing that is working very closely with Bristol City Council in particular, but also other landowners like UWE in Bristol. Tracy is doing a lot of work on that, so if you're interested, you can chat to her afterwards. But what's happening there? Okay. So on our website we have a link to a land seekers survey where people can register their interest in finding land for starting a growing project, and then we can help match available plots of land up with people that are interested in starting growing projects. So that's a really exciting piece of work. So once you've got more land being produced, we've got some more successful food production enterprises in front of us. But in addition to that, we need to make sure that we have that access to the markets as well. So that involves sort of thinking about sharing distribution and infrastructure, and also, so Tracy again was involved in creating a report for us on routes to market for local producers, which is really helpful, and that's on the website if you're interested. We've also explored the possibility of a local food brand, so having a sort of local to Bristol stamp that we could put on products by local producers, which would help sort of give a profile to people's products and might generate more demand for it, possibly. But that's an area of work that we're trying to get some more funding behind to really help develop and deliver. Another thing is improving fairness and efficiencies. So to help the small producers that can struggle with various obstacles, we need to really work together. So kind of working collaboratively and sharing resources and talking to each other is a really big part of it. So you kind of think of Bristol Food Producers as being a sort of solidarity network in a way. And the greater number of producers that are involved, sort of, you get that power in numbers, and you can start influencing policy and steps like that. So it's really important to kind of get that power behind it. We've also got, so our membership is at deliberately low prices to try and make it as inclusive as possible to a wide range of people. We have also a amazing resource directory on the website, so if anybody's they've got a great idea and they want to start an enterprise but they have no idea where to start, then it's kind of giving you lots and lots of helpful tips. So we've got our food production enterprises. Once you've got those, you've got even more people available to then train up the next generation of food growers and food producers. So we've got this beautiful sort of circular system of a local food system going. So just going back to the sort of skills and enterprise support, because that's something we're focusing on heavily at the moment. We have started offering skill sharing masterclasses. So those include growing skills, so enterprise and horticultural training, some writing workshops to really try and get people, growers and food producers, to understand the importance of sort of being able to communicate your food story and the purpose of your business well to their target audience, and content marketing, you name it, we're trying to get on it. We have funded the development of the Grow Leader course at Food Bristol. Some breaking news, we've got a really exciting pilot scheme happening in Bristol. So we've got Fresh Start Horticultural Academy starting this summer. And so the purpose of that is to give horticultural business a really strong sort of business backing behind them and really good understanding and grips of enterprise and marketing and all of that, those necessary skills to get off the ground. And we have, Bristol Food Producers are offering 5 members bursary to cover the £95 fee. So that's some really exciting news for you. If you're interested in that, do come talk to me afterwards and I'll tell you how to get involved. We also, off the screen, we have our very own certified learning programme starting in 2017 called the Bristol Certificate, or Livelihood Skills for Land Workers. And that is equally, it's really trying to give those sort of enterprise skills to growers and food producers locally to get it all going. So that sort of covers our skills in our skills training. That was a really, really quick tour of what we're doing. It's hard to cover it in 7 minutes. But if you are interested in becoming a member, which you should join us and join the local food revolution. We're offering 20% off our membership this week only using the code Feeding Bristols, and you've all got membership information on your chairs, so feel free to grab that and come and ask some questions at the end. But I'm now going to hand over to Angela.
Thank you very much, Claire. I think Claire hasn't really said as well that she's only been working as a very part-time coordinator from the beginning of this year, doing a fantastic job, so thank you very much. So before we take any questions, we're going to hear from Angela Raffle. Welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. So if you're not, probably many of you already know Angela, but she's got many hats on, a long history of, I don't know how you fit it all in. We've got instrumental in commissioning and guiding Who Feeds Bristol research, helped set up Bristol's Food Policy Council, of which she's now Vice Chair, was a founder member of the Community Farm, and is now Chair of the Trustees, and also a Director of Transition Bristol. So,
thank you very much. So probably most of you have no idea that since 2011, Bristol has had something called a Food Policy Council, which is what I'm going to tell you about. And let's just start with philosophy. That when I was 12, 1968, for the first time, humans saw the planet Earth from space. And it changed a lot about how people think about themselves. If you could see that, that's a man at NASA looking just overwhelmed with awe, wonder and love. So that's my philosophy. We're all fragments of this living universe with a shared responsibility to take care of it with love, courage and openness. And that's to prime you for the fact that when I show you this slide, which is that the Food Policy Council is a bunch of key stakeholders whose job is to put food on the agenda and keep it there, I doubt if you're all leaping with joyful enthusiasm, because I suspect most of you identify yourselves more as activists than bureaucrats. How many of you would count yourselves primarily as bureaucrats? Yeah, that's what I expected. So I would invite you to listen to your inner world when you think about the Food Policy Council, and just notice, are you thinking, that sounds really important and useful, and aren't we lucky that those people do it? Or are you thinking, sounds like a talking shop, sure it won't make any difference? Okay. So 2 very, very important reports got produced in Bristol. Can't see them. Can I have the next one?
Yeah.
One was the Peacock report. Oh, right. There we go. One was the Peacock report and one was Who Feeds Bristol. And they were both happened because of Transition Bristol, and they both looked at all the systems that depend on oil, and particularly the food system. But when you look at the food system, it's not just the concrete, visible bits. like the food growing and the vans. It's also on the invisible stuff. It's what people think, it's what people believe, it's unwritten rules, it's written rules, it's laws. So one part of the complex puzzle, which means we have this Food Connections Festival, we were on Radio 4 food programme last night, is the Food Policy Council plugging away behind the scenes. And one of my favourite quotes is from the Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, which says, if you tear down a factory and the rationality that put it there remains, it will come back. And rationality, we gloss over, it means thoughts, how people think. So in a way, we're trying to work at a very bureaucratic level on how people think. So who's on the Food Policy Council? Christian on behalf of Food Network, myself, Simon Wood is the chair. He's a very senior person in North Bristol Trust, which was the first hospital in England to get silver on Food for Life. Mark Kidner from the wholesale market at St Phillips. Tom Andrews from the Soil Association, who set up the Sustainable Food Cities Network. Joy Carey, who did the Who Foods Bristol report. And a few other people as well, including Sid, who founded the Tiny Cafes, who founded Food Connections Festival, Yo Valley, and we used to have Amy Robinson and Nina from Green Capital and Go Green Businesses, and we need to fill that gap. We're constantly needing to fill gaps. So what on earth does the Food Policy Council do, and what has it done? We make all the stuff that the activists are doing much more visible by putting it in reports and banging on about it in all kinds of avenues, corridors, boardrooms, meetings. We are a letterhead to enable us to do stuff that none of us would be allowed to do in our day jobs, like putting in really annoying comments to the planning inspector when the draft Bristol Development Framework doesn't acknowledge food growing land. We are a convener of events, conferences, conversations, and I think one of the most important things we did was, when I first got involved in food, this is the imagined statement from the Bristol Good Food Plan. When I first got involved in food, there was like at least 8 different factions, and they all saw themselves as quite separate. So there were people who cared about food poverty, there were people who cared about workers' rights and fair trade, there were people who cared about lively high streets, there were people who cared about just really tasty food, there were people who cared about healthy food, there were people who cared about the ecological world, there were people who cared about animal welfare. And the business as usual brigade could just divide and rule us just by using stereotypical statements and judgments. So they go, oh, well, you're also middle class, or oh, you're all anti-capitalist, or oh, you're all a bunch of hippies, you're all extremists. And people like me, health people, we were just boxed in a corner where all I was allowed to do was say whether some food-like substance in a packet was bad for you or not. And we've now joined people. So our mantra is, tasty, healthy, affordable, good for nature, good for workers, good for animal welfare, and good for local businesses. So it gets everyone on one platform. And we've done the Good Food Plan, and we've meant that we've got silver on the Sustainable Food Cities Board. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Angela. A really good snapshot about some very in-depth and important work. And we'd just also like to plug, because Bristol has just got the Silver Award for Sustainable Food City. If you'd like to find out more about what that's all about, what that means, how you can get involved, we'd like to invite you to come along to a conference that we're doing on next Thursday, the 5th. So we put it into sort of 3 shorter slots, so you don't have to have a full-day conference. One focused on business, one on the wider food community and activists, and also the awards. So we'd like to see some of you there, definitely. Thank you. So this might just be a good point, just for a few minutes, look sort of more at sort of the umbrella, the sort of organisations, the sort of strategy that's helping to support some of the real practical projects and businesses we're going to hear from in a moment. Have any of you got any questions, specifically for Claire, Angela, but be for anyone, or any comments really? Hi, thank you.
So with our membership in particular, we have 2 strands. So the members that we're really keen to support, and the ones that have higher voting rights within our sort of structure as a Community Benefit Society are the growers and producers within 10 miles of Bristol. But we are aware that if you want to have that diversity and want a realistic local food system within a city, you have to incorporate those areas outside of the city as well. So we also have a second bracket for growers and producers within 10 to 50 miles. So within 50 miles would be our sort of local. Yes, exactly. And I think with the local food brand sort of idea, that was a similar sort of radius that we're thinking as well. Yeah. I think that tallies with a lot of other local sort of branded products as well.
Anybody else got a question? Following on from what we've just heard, think about the Food Policy Council of Bristol Food Producers. Hi. Do you want to say anything about that?
There's quite a lot in the Who Feeds Bristol report. You need a much bigger area. But what that report uncovered is how important the food economy is in the west of England to jobs, second only to health and social care, and that was how we engaged local politicians. This is about the local economy. So we're not saying that we should do without bananas and lemons and oranges and spices, but there's an awful lot of staples that can be produced within the west of England subregion. And there's a lot of hidden impacts, you know, so we transport cauliflowers from Lincolnshire and back in order to get them in supermarkets, because that's where the packing infrastructure is. So it's just holding up a mirror and saying the way we got it now isn't really all that good for all kinds of reasons.
Any other questions before we move on to Humphrey? Bonnie?
So our membership is open to anybody. Obviously we exist to support the producers primarily, but we do have a lot of people that are members that are just keen to support local food. So if any of you are in that bracket, then don't feel that you're excluded at all. And there are a lot of things that you can take advantage of, I'm sure. So I think, I'm not sure, I'm just trying to think. There are one or two here that are already members and are just local, like Steph, for instance, local. So that's. Yes, so it's producers, growers, food processors, distributors, retailers. We're thinking of the whole package really, because if you want to support local food, you've got to go from the beginning, from growing the food to how it's getting to the consumer. So we have to think about supporting those retailers and getting that product into the shops and the whole system. So absolutely, retailers, distributors, the works. So we've got people like, so Fresh Range are a member and they are working across Bristol and Bath and with the Bain schools as well. So that's a really important one because they're working with a lot of our suppliers to get their products to market.
Hi, thanks. No. Does local food mean organic? What do you want to?
So no, they're very different things. Obviously, organic is a standards to the ecological production administered by the Soil Association. Like personally, I'm a local producer, but I can't afford the administration fee for organic. So no, they're very different things, and they sort of have different uses and roles in the alternative food system, I'd say.
The only thing I was thinking is that you guys have got a pledge about food, and I don't remember it, so I'm going to pass that back to you.
So it's a really good question actually, because local doesn't necessarily mean it's good, ethically produced food, and that's something to really bear in mind. So when producers sign up to become a member, we ask that they agree to they pledge for the Bristol Good Food Charter, and so that involves, it doesn't mean you have to be organic certified, but it means that you're growing under the sort of principles so that you're not pouring tons of fertiliser on the ground and you're really trying to work towards it. So we want to make sure that healthy and sustainable food is grown in Bristol, not just grown locally. So it's really important.
Okay, thanks ever so much. Some great questions. We've got 3 more speakers here, so I'd like to invite next Humphrey Lloyd, who's the founder of Edible Futures. So a tiny part of a global movement that is working to create a better food system for everyone. So Edible Futures operate a small holding in Frenchay where they run a market garden producing salads, herbs and vegetables, which they deliver to Bristol restaurants and households via bicycle on the day of harvest. But I'll pass over to you, Humphrey, to tell us more.
How are we doing, guys? Yeah? Okay, so yeah, I run Edible Futures. It's a 1.2 acre small holding, okay, and we grow salads, herbs and vegetables. And we sell them in 2 different ways. We sell them wholesale to restaurants, and we also now run a scheme called Salad Drop, which sells individual salad bags to private households, okay? So if anyone out there either runs a restaurant and wants to buy wholesale local food, talk to me, or if you're just a private household and want to get a bag of salad each week delivered to a drop-off point near your house, talk to me as well, okay? Our mission, this. Yeah, there we go. Our mission is to grow food in a sustainable way, sell it in Bristol, and to provide these 2 people, Humphrey Lloyd and Sid Goldsmith, with a living wage. Okay, that's our mission. Okay, and it's very difficult to do. Why is it difficult to do? Why is it difficult for us to do this? Okay, because of the interaction of 3 important circumstances that are very important to understand if you want to understand the difficulties in creating a local food system. Okay, and these are, on the one hand, top right hand box, yeah? Sustainable agriculture is by its very nature labour intensive. I'm not going to talk more about that now because we don't have enough time, but believe me it is, okay? Now, on the right we have the cost of food, okay? And on the bottom we have the cost of living, principally rent, okay? To talk about the cost of food in terms of our percentage expenditure in the last 50 years has approximately stayed stable with a slight decline, okay? A slight decline, but approximately stayed stable. In the last 150 years, it's declined massively from about 30% of our consumer spending to now about 10%, okay? More significantly, the amount of money that producers like myself get from every pound spent on food in the UK has plummeted, okay? So now, 9p in every pound spent on food goes to a farmer. Okay, 9p, so less than 10%. Okay, why is that? Now I'm going to skip back. Because of the setup of the food system. Okay, which means that we have at the bottom we have this hourglass figure here. Yeah. At the top we have producers, farmers like myself that produce food. Right at the other end, at the bottom, we have consumers. All of us buy food. Okay. In the middle, we have a pinch point, where a very small number of supermarket retailers handle this food and get it from producers like myself to consumers like you. Okay? Now, basic market economics means when you have a very small number of people in an economic system, they have a disproportionate amount of power. So that is why 6 supermarkets have been able to maintain the amount of food, the amount of money we spend on food, whilst reducing the amount that they pay to farmers. Okay? Does that make sense? Cool. Okay, so cost of food, basically, us farmers, we're getting less of every pound spent on food because of supermarkets. Now, the cost of living is basically determined by the price of rent, because most of us now in the UK spend more than 50% of our income on rent. Yeah, if you live in London, it's 72%, and in Bristol, it's somewhere in between those. It's about 60%. Okay, so basically, it's very difficult for me to be a farmer in Bristol if salads cost £10 a kilo and my rent is £400 a month. Yeah? Trying to break that conundrum is what we're trying to do if we're serious about getting farmers on the land in Bristol and other cities around the UK. Yeah? Does that make sense? Cool. So what is a future food system going to look like? Future urban food system going to look like if we actually pull it off? I personally think it's going to see a proliferation of urban livestock, okay? Omnivorous livestock. Chickens, goats and pigs. Okay? Now, why is that? Firstly, because they produce high value and rich, dense protein sources, okay? Not vegetables, but actually things like meat and eggs, okay? Which are higher value than vegetables. And secondly, and more importantly, there's an ecological reason that a thing like a pig, an animal like a pig, processes human waste, like scraps that we would otherwise compost, and turns it into bacon. That is a function of a pig or a goat in an agricultural system. Okay, And because cities produce a lot of human waste in forms like scraps, like compost, if we have pigs in our gardens, they will instantly and cheaply process that into meat for us, okay? So who had a piggy bank when they were a kid? Does anyone have a piggy bank? Why is it a piggy bank and not a piggy monkey or a piggy cow? Does anyone know? It's because you put in trash, the point of a pig is you put in trash and it gives you gold, yeah? And that is the role of a pig in an agricultural system, and it's designed for an urban agricultural system, okay? So we see a proliferation of small-scale livestock. And in terms of horticulture, actually, I think you'd see projects of at least an acre or over and outside of the city, yeah? So, like peri-urban production, basically, rather than community allotments and forest gardens. So, if anyone thinks, one sec, just jumping back. If anyone thinks like all I'm talking about, or like all I'm proposing is essentially what sort of Victorian London looked like in terms of agriculture, you'd be right, yeah? There's a reason why our forebears developed an agricultural suite based around urban livestock and peri-urban horticulture, because that's what works, yeah? Rather than anything else. Okay, so also processing. Processing is really important. Essentially that goes back to this thing about adding value. Getting more than that 9p in the pounds, getting more than that. So this is a picture of the Peasant Evolution Production Co-op Initiative in Devon. So this is a processing lab for foodstuffs, okay, for local farmers. So they have a pasteurising unit, they have a juicer, they have a cider press, and they have a small-scale butchery. So that allows local producers to come in, membership costs £1, and they can use the facilities to add value and then sell at a higher price. Okay, so I think having something like this in Bristol would be a really key way of allowing producers like myself to add value and keep their job, keep making a living. So Bristol Ferments, a new project that is doing producing sauerkraut, is an example of that. It's adding value, so allowing a producer to like sell something, get a bit more cash, keep themselves in the job. So we're talking about practical steps about how we start to achieve producing this food system that we want to see and keeping people like me on the land and getting other people in. Like a really important practical thing could be reforming the Common Agricultural Policy. Okay. Now it sounds a bit way out, but I assure you it's not. It's practical and it's pragmatic. Okay. The Common Agricultural Policy subsidised farmers to the tune of £58 billion per year in Europe. Okay. This is 40% of EU spending. Okay. Now most of us in this world are in the job of chasing around funding. Yeah, funding bids, which is like a pittance. And what's more, it's a pittance that we fight each other for. Yeah? If we reform this policy, the Common Agricultural Policy, by one iota, we could massively subsidise and bankroll projects like me getting into small-scale production in cities, whatever it be, like urban goats, urban fish, whatever. Yeah? If we just took off one tiny slice of what is an unbelievable budget that essentially goes to landowners and corporate businesses. Tate & Lyle got £500 million from this last year, and the Queen took 800,000. Yeah? Because she's a landowner. That's the way the system works. And if we reformed it, we could turn that into sustainable food production. Cash for sustainable food production. This is the amount, this is the percentage that farmers under 5 hectares like myself get from the Common Agricultural Policy. A whopping 0%. Fantastic. Just to close, what I've been asked to talk about is what is our vision of a food system and how do we get there? Okay, so I've said a bit about the vision, like peri-urban market gardens. How long have we got? Yeah, peri-urban market gardens, urban livestock. Yeah, how do we get there? We've got to get out there and do practical stuff, put up polytunnels and stuff, but also we need to change the economic and political framework that allows those three things: the cost of rent, the cost of food, and the labour-intensive nature of agriculture, to keep people off the land. Okay, and I would argue that the way to try and change that is to basically campaign politically for things like reform of the Common Agricultural Policy. Or, okay, so this is an action that me and other members of the Landworks Alliance did a couple of weekends ago. So this starts dropping a giant 8-metre banner off the Treasury. It leaves public land for public good. And this was a comment about the sell-off of council farms and council housing, okay? Which are two things that this government is doing. This is going to make that triangle even worse. It's going to drive up rents and drive up agricultural rents and make it even harder for farmers to make a living, okay? So this is just one example of like how engaging in a political process is really important for breaking the deadlock around getting farmers on the land and producing sustainably for people in cities like Bristol and beyond in the UK.
Thank you very much, Humphrey. So a lot of great vision there and lots of very practical steps from the small to the revolution, so thank you very much. So I'd also now ask Alice to come forward. She's founder of the Bristol Fish Project, a community-supported urban aquaponic farm and founded in response to the waste crisis. But I'll let Alice tell you all about that. Thank you.
Oh. Can you bring up the first slide of the next presentation? Thank you.
Well, I'll say the rest of it while you're...
Fine.
Got it?
Yes, great. So I guess the first thing I wanted to say was that my food background is quite eclectic. I grew up in a farming family and I worked as a chef when I was a student. I worked on farms and then I've ended up in food research. I've had a patisserie on a market when I first graduated and then got into food systems research. I studied environmental geosciences but kind of ended up that way. And then I set up Bristol Fish Project in 2011, running pilots, and I also did an augmented reality project helping kids make healthy food choices in supermarkets. So even though my background's very kind of fingers in the mud, what's happened over time is that I've come to take a bit more of a Promethean perspective. So when I started out in environmental research, I was like, oh my god, it's a catastrophe. And now I'm like, there are low-tech and high-tech approaches that we can take in with all the other approaches to local food. So I wanted just to bring a more techie input into this discussion. It's not a panacea. I don't see it as the whole picture, but it's what I can give to the conversation. So I'm going to start with that perspective today. Oh my god, I keep breaking this thing. I don't know, I'm just pressing next, but anyway. Bristol Fish Project is a community-supported aquaponic farm, and how that works is we use urban food waste, digest it, change it into feed for fish. The fish then make nitrous waste, like ammonium, through their gills and their feces. Bacteria turn that into nitrates, and in an aquatic plant growing system, plants will grow on nitrates. So we harvest fish and plants and we use urban food waste to do it. We've been running a pilot for a couple of years, and then we've got a tiny system in Phoenix Cafe in town, and we've got through a strategic grant a big warehouse on the edge of Bishopsworth in Hartcliffe, and we plan on having a 40,000 litre system in there, and at that point we'll be the biggest indoor grower of this particular technology in the UK, which is exciting for us. Through my research, there's a few things that I've been noticing in the food system that are not just about aquaponics or vertical growing, that are kind of techie, futuristic things that are happening. I've noticed that people have, there you go, look, there's a picture of our farming process. Great. People have started eating lower in the food chain. So insects, eating less meat, more fish. So that's one of the kind of future trajectories that seems to be happening. People are eating different things, so they're making flour out of, like, not grains, so maybe bean flours. There's more production of different types of grains. People are fermenting foods, kombucha, kefir, sourdough, lychee and sauerkrauts, and there's also new cooking techniques. I don't meet very many people that talk about the future of cooking as a part of the way that we do food, and it seems like steam ovens might, in a decade or 15 years, be replacing the microwave, and there's this renewal of pressure cooking and slow cooking. Augmented reality, which is a particular interest of mine, is how you can give people more information so that they can make better choices. And for me, that came from, I had stepchildren, and the supermarket seemed like designed to sell them just the worst possible products. And so I wanted to give them an interface so that they could see something different. So we made a game with Lynn, actually, and the idea was that you could scan a barcode on any food in a typical supermarket, and it would return the nutrition information as superpowers. And they were algorithms built in so that the superpowers actually related to the nutritional information, and then it was a game so their characters would evolve and get really happy and well or sick, and the aesthetics of the characters were changing based on what they were eating. So it was a way for primary school age children to interact with the supermarket environment. So I think augmented reality is quite cool as a technology way of doing food. And then fortification foods, I know that some of it's a bit like vitamins in cereals. We know that doesn't actually do anything, but it's still a trend, and there's a lot of fortification, like even in fish feeds, which I see, using microflora and algae to fortify the food that they're being fed changes their nutritional values. That's great. And hacking diets, that's crazy. I don't know, like manufactured meat, I guess people have heard of, where they're sort of bioreacting meat, which is interesting but could be great. It's going to sort of end the subjugation of, I guess, food animals, if that became the future, but also people that monitor how they feel, their energy levels, their arousal, how much they've sort of done in a day, and compare it to what they've been eating, and they're like super geekily recording everything that happens to them and everything they eat. And these guys in America designed this food, Soylent, and it's supposed to be a whole sludge food with all the nutrition in it that you could possibly need. So these are the trends that I've been seeing. So yeah, much wider than what I would work with day to day. So a vision for me would be growing food with Bristol, not kind of for Bristol, and that I would be putting into the vision, contributing my bit, which would be kind of community scale, symbiotic agricultural ecosystems, part of a circular economy, and some part of that would be futuristic, artificial intelligence controlled precision, vertical farming, aquaponics, which is where I geek out day to day. I would want to focus on decentralized distribution and production, mixing it with all the other types of production, so it not being kind of the way that food is grown. Focus on optimizing nutritional value, sustainability, welfare, and meaningful work. I mean, one thing I've noticed with hydroponics is in industrialized agriculture, yield and aesthetics are the only factors that farmers look at. So if you get a lot and it looks good to sell, that's what you want. Whether it has nutritional value is not thought about. So when you're feeding hydroponic, kind of injecting nutrients into your hydroponics, you're doing only what's necessary for it to look good and yield. So that means basically nutritionally valueless food. So I really like to see that change in this future for the city. Restorative agriculture, I think we're working with eels and Bristol Water and looking at helping to get elver conservation. In our plan for the warehouse, we'll be putting 60% of our on-growing back into the natural environment, and I think other types of agriculture can also be part of restoration. And one of the main things that I'm excited about is that if, like the UN says, we need to increase our food production by 70%, if we can bring some part of that into the urban area, we can reduce the pressure on our rural areas. And it might be that we can even recover some of those areas towards a more, I guess, a climax community, ecologically speaking, so the best ecological functioning that they could have. So yeah, I'd love to see more of our food production taken into the city. So a bit of how that might look. I mean, well, we've got, I think there's a line at the top which was about the fact that there are like millions of square feet of empty office space in Bristol. There's been Freedom of Information Acts requests about it, and it's something that we don't admit to, but we could have millions and millions of square feet of food production in those kinds of environments if that's what we wanted to do, or housing, or something more useful than them being empty. We've got all these valuable urban waste streams, and if you can integrate urban farming, any type, into that, it can kind of absorb those and recirculate them. Decentralised food production means that people can get fresh food with like lower transport costs. And if people are getting access to food that's produced transparently, then you can see what the nutritional value of it is, and you can start to get people knowing that the reason they're spending more on the food is because it has a nutritional value that is relevant, and so they're getting more for what they're paying for. Urban farms can make urban planning better. From fishing stocks perspective, restoring marine fisheries, not urban fisheries, there's not so many of those. But these are all things that increasing local agriculture and bolstering the local food system can achieve for cities. What steps are there? Yeah, Bristol Food Producers basically doing great things already. I think it would be really good to increase the accessibility of aquaponics in particular. With my colleague Robin, we've taken over the British Aquaponics Association, so a national resource for that. I think entrepreneurs in any social enterprise need more support. Like the hardest thing I've found is starting a company and having no access to funds to do it. You just have to struggle so much. And I've been doing it and kind of got through that. But if you could take benefits for a year, I think that would be an amazing thing that a city could do for its entrepreneurs. And then slightly harder things to do. I think that local agriculture should get the same support as conventional agriculture, so we should get magic contracts where everyone's on benefits, subsidies, tax breaks, backhanded deals on land. We should be allowed to externalise all the environmental and social costs onto taxpayers and consumers through loopholes and corruption and lack of transparency, and then we'd be on a much fairer foothold to be able to increase the local food economy. More seriously though, there could be policy interventions about empty buildings, for example, and the way that costs are internalised in conventional agriculture. We could put more pressure politically on making them pay for their own costs instead of externalising them all. And then I'd love to see like minimum basic income or a 4-day week. I think that would all support the local food sector. There we go. Yeah, and some references. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Alice. Wow. So we're getting some very good practical steps there and getting very radical again, but lots of food for thought, and hopefully we'll have lots of discussion about that in a moment. So last but not least, we've got Phil. Founder and MD of the Better Food Company, whose mission is to create a sustainable food chain. Phil's also one of the founding members of the Community Farm. They've got one of their stands there at the back if you want to find out more about that after. Thank you, Phil.
One of the advantages of doing very little preparation to come and speak to you is that you listen to all these wonderful people with great projects, and you start getting all these other ideas and things that come into it, and then you get to here and you think, God, where do I start? And it all looks a little bit like chaos. But that said, I do have some things to say that I think are quite important. I'm just going to start off by saying a little bit more about what I do. So yes, Better Food, which I think some of you or all of you, or certainly many of you know, and we've been going for a long time, and we're just about to open a third store, which we're really excited about. So I just wanted to use this platform to say there's a third store opening on Wapping Wharf in about 2 months' time. The community farm is so important in this movement in terms of what it's doing and how it's approaching. And I'm not going to say anything about it, but do explore it, and I really invite you to go and partake in being a member of that community at some point in the next months, year, whatever. And then I'm also a part of something which Bonnie and I have had a lot to do with, called Beacon Farms. There's some developments going on there which I won't say much about, but essentially we're set up to try and work out ways of getting people on the land, of helping with the educational aspects of the land, of people to access the land on business and things like that. And we've got various things that have become quite exciting, that we've nearly managed to get a load of land to set up, and agriversity and things like this. The undercurrent of it all, and again look up the Beacon Farms and what's going on, but the undercurrent of it all is that there's a group of people who are pushing in this realm, again, along with Bristol Food Producers and the Blue Finger Alliance and things like that. So it's another body, another platform to try and make sure that we build a better, fairer access to land, amongst other things. Who are we in this room right now? How many of you, and you at the back, and you who've just come in, How many of us in this room use supermarkets for more than 50% of our weekly shop? Hands up. Okay, not very many, as I guessed. So, how many people out there in the city use supermarkets for more than 50% of their shopping? 95, 98%? So what are we doing here? Why haven't we got 500 people here? Who are we speaking to? And what's our purpose here today? To build a stronger food community, to build a fairer, more sustainable food Bristol. And I guess my challenge in a sense is, how do we engage with those communities? Because we're all doing a fantastic job. These are fabulous projects, and some of you I know are involved in a lot of really amazing projects. And these, I believe, are this is the learning area for us in Bristol. We're providing, all of us and a lot of other people out there are building fabulous ventures, projects, teaching people, but we're only at the moment penetrating a very, very small strand of the people who need to know about this. And I think one of the things that we have to accept, I love the idea of we need to work really hard on challenging the agricultural policy and working to get some real step changes in that. I think those are things that, there are a lot of people working bloody hard on it. But I think something that we have to accept, if we look back through all of history, is that change is either very slow and very manageable, or we get step changes due to massive events, war, famine, crises of some economic shifts of various kinds. So to get to the dream scenario in Bristol, where we have a major change which involves hundreds and hundreds of markets every week. Can you imagine that? Bristol having hundreds of markets every week. So where all the high streets become really bustling places of interaction and of community, where there's thousands of shops, independent shops. You know, this is the vision of what things might be like. We're accessing food in different ways, and we're exploring different ideas of how we... That will only really come about when we need it to come about. When we really, really need it. Not because we think, oh, this would be a lovely idea. And so, peak oil, water crisis, climate chaos, which, my God, isn't it chaotic out there right now? It's completely mental out there, it really is. These are the things which are going to start to build and bring about step change. And I think what we need to celebrate and get better at is understanding what we're doing right now. That we are building the knowledge, the infrastructure, so that when we really need to change, there's a lot of us out there who can be those teachers, those advocates, those mentors to the rest of the population who may be interested in it but are not nearly as engaged in it as we are. And I thought also one of the things that would be quite interesting to do, wouldn't it, be to knock on a neighbour's door that you've never met and say, hi, I've got an idea, I think you ought to become involved in this, or would you like to become involved in this project? That's where you come and get your food, and you're going to be paying something in the region of 50 or 60% more for your food than you are now. How do you think about that? What do you think about that idea? Do you think that's good? How many of you want to pay 50, 60% more for your food tomorrow? Nobody. But we need to. We absolutely need to. You know, our farmers are on their knees worldwide. They're just being screwed and screwed and screwed. And we are, at one level, happily going along with this. And we really need to challenge more of that. We need our farmers to be celebrated in a really big way. So I run Better Food Company, and I buy stuff and I sell it at a margin, and I make a profit. And are farmers who I want to give a hell of a lot more money to and sell it in my shop for a hell of a lot more than I do at the moment. And it's really hard. It's really hard to push that. We already, because we're pretty much, we're mostly organic, we already get slated, oh, you're too expensive, that's organic, that's out there. But actually, most of what we do is try and make sure that we're giving people who are operating sustainably a reasonable return. But that's still not good enough. A lot of our vegetable farmers, the community farm, they can't make money out of growing vegetables. Nobody makes money out of growing vegetables. Bless you, this guy down here is working his butt off and doing a fantastic job with a premium product, and he knows well that salad growing is a way into that. It's very difficult to do that with potatoes or carrots or onions or anything like that. So we've got a lot of very big challenges, and I'm not saying that I'm not wanting to kind of condemn that in any way. It is what it is. But we should also make sure that we're really celebrating what we do and understand the power of it for future generations when things get tough. Sorry, I'm just sort of catching up a little bit, so bear with me a minute. So we need a cultural shift, we know that, and we know that it's going to be hard won. But I think when you look at what things could bring about a faster change, I think there's a lot going on in Bristol that is beginning to free up the opportunity for this to happen. Politically, I think our city has been very good on this, but I think some of the things that can make a really big difference is reducing the access of cars to cities, which is happening, and it's extremely unpopular, and I think, good on you, George, plough it on through. And I know he's been incredibly unpopular by a lot of people, but actually this is about designing cities that are fit for people, fit for communities. And when you design cities that are fit for communities, that brings about greater security, it brings about a greater sense of safety. And when you have that, you feel freer to go out, you have more trust. And I'll tell you one of the things that I find interesting is on this thing of trust is when I look, and it's particularly our first shop in St Werburgh's, people use that shop not just because they want organic food, they use it because they love the experience, and there's something about it which is about trust and safety and security. And that's where we need our high streets to get to. They need to be places where we really love to be and we know that we're safe. And cars play, because of the way they're kind of cocooned, play a role in going against that. And obviously public transport and facilities for bikes. 1 minute, is that all right? Cool, okay. So they all help. I think we need to work with our councils, and the Food Policy Council can support us in this process, but I think we need to put more pressure on our councils to put real money behind change, behind access to land, to enabling access to land, and getting sensible leases in terms of leases, and being able to live on the land, whether it's in the city or on a peri-urban city. But planning is such a big issue for people. You can't even put caravans on a lot of them. Sort of temporary accommodation is very hard. But I think that's all I need to say. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Phil, and to all of our panellists. Just so many ideas, and to throw it open to the floor again. So have you got any questions for anybody, but also any comments? Because I know you're all doing some great things as well, but quite a few people I can recognise here. I know you're doing great stuff. So have you got any visions for Bristol or practical steps in terms of a local food future? If there are any questions? Bonnie, thank you. hear that? Yeah. So basically Bonnie's asking, everybody here is a member of Bristol Food Producers, can have a role in decision making. What would they like to see Bristol Food Producers doing to help, scale up food production and help create this vision? So should we have sort of just one thing from everybody as we go? Not ready? Who's ready?
We exist for you guys. We exist for you. Come on, tell us what to do. So if there's one thing, and I know there's so many things that you can do to help support that increase in local food production, but if there's one thing that you feel is key, share it with us.
Well, does anybody want to share?
Oh yes, absolutely. It's open to everybody.
I kind of think that there's a mic there on the table.
Sorry, thank you. Oh yeah. Ooh. It kind of goes a little bit with part of what I was saying earlier on. I think we need to find ways, and we need you to help us find ways of breaking out of our existing marketplaces. There are some great possibilities that come up. There was a fantastic opportunity to do a sort of people's supermarket in Knowle West, and there's a building there that's going to be knocked down, and it's all ready, and the planning is sort of almost there, sort of thing. But there's something which is kind of it faded out. It was going to get a couple of million or something potentially if it won the right award, but it didn't. And we need good food in so many places in this city, and the infrastructure is not there. And I'm not sure that the political will is there, because there is still this idea that around cheap food. I don't know. We just need to find ways of penetrating into other markets, and I think that happens through great stories for a start. I think the power of stories, I think, is huge. So Humphrey, if you knock on some doors in Kingswood and telling them about what you're doing, you'd have people really interested. They may not engage with it at the same level as people who've got it all already. And I think that says the same for all of us. We all have amazing projects that people need to know about, but they don't. And that's the challenge of these. How do we get the word out there and have the audiences where we can tell the stories? If we had 500 people here, bust in from a surprise happening where they weren't told anything about it, just said, right, here you go, here's 20 quid, come and be here. That's where there's a lot of learning, I think. Anyway.
I had a thought, which was the one area where the supermarkets are getting quite itchy is that the online platforms for food delivery are taking a market share at quite a phenomenal rate, and they're losing their market share, and they try and create their own platforms, but I think Tesco and Asda run their delivery services at a loss, which is crazy and also undermines what people are trying to do. But I know that Bristol Food Producers is doing a lot to think about connecting people with food using the internet as a platform, and I guess more of that would be something that my geeky side really appreciates. Yeah.
I would say seeds. So something Bristol Food Producers could do, I think, which would be great, is this kind of like a seed collection and distribution service. So the nature of saving and distributing seeds is difficult because of cross-pollination issues. So it's difficult to do lots of seeds on one site. It's why it's difficult to run a seed farm. But if say we had 10 different growers across Bristol, and 3 of them did one brassica, and then whatever, the others did lettuces and other vegetables, and then you have like a central organisation, maybe Bristol Food Producers, who could collect them, pull them, and then make them available and sell them cheaply. I think that personally, as someone who's spend 600 quid on seeds a year or something, is a significant outlay. So if we had a good sort of organisation facility for saving and distributing open pollinated seeds in Bristol, I think that'd be great.
Is it on? Do I have to press it then? Just a couple of reflections. 10 years ago, when I first helped set up White Ladies Farmers and Fair Trading Market, which is now weekly on a Saturday, I knew nothing about the food system really. I only knew, my background in fighting the tobacco industry has equipped me for understanding some of the deep, nasty game that goes on with the business as usual brigade in the food world. But I didn't really understand much about the food system, and that's quite scary for people. They feel not on safe territory. When we did Who Feeds Bristol, I was talking to people and they said, we just don't know what you're on about, Angela. We don't understand what you're on about. We don't understand, what are we supposed to eat? Are you telling me I'm evil for shopping in a supermarket? And so it's really complex for you, and we had to kind of really work out how to do messages that didn't seem to be criticising people at all. I've seen the most massive change in food culture in Bristol. So I've lived here since 1984. I can remember going out to Hartcliffe in the very early discussions which led to the establishment of Hartcliffe Health and Environment Action Group. There has been such a shift, it's massive. I've been talking to the local enterprise partnership people for years about food, or since they've existed. They're basically, all they think about is airports. They finally started noticing food. That's a change for the better. And I also spent probably about 30 hours solid finishing the evidence submission for the Sustainable Food City Silver Award. I was bowled over by how much is happening, because we had to assemble all these evidence about what everyone's doing, and quite a lot in the business sector. So, at our conference next week, we're doing with Go Green businesses, so the morning is a business brunch. We've never done that before, so I'm kind of wondering, when is the business world going to bring its real expertise and entrepreneurship, not just very, very committed, extremely different, special people like you. Those are just some reflections.
Are there any other questions before I...
I'd just like to say, I don't live in Bristol, I've come from outside. I think you're doing a fantastic job here, and I've come purely because I'm interested to see how all your hard work over the last 20 years can be copied and rolled out to other places. And thanks to the food programme, I think they're always singing Bristol's praises. And all the different places to live in.
If we can create a sort of replicable model, that other cities can look at and say, hey, that Bristol are doing this, why don't we jump on board? Then that's a really exciting thing. I know Bonnie attended the Oxford the farming conference, and a lot of the people that attended there were amazed at what Bristol City Council are doing, working with us to match people up with land across the city, and that's a really exciting part of what we're about, and that's something I was going to come on to actually, that land is a huge thing in trying to be growing food in the city, and what we need to do is really try and secure land for food growing, especially grade 1 agricultural land. So I don't know, some of you might have heard of the Blue Finger Alliance. So the Blue Finger is a strip of grade 1 agricultural land that runs sort of along the M32. Beacon Farms, that Bonnie and Phil are involved with are working with the council to secure a sort of 999-year lease to protect and safeguard that land for food grain purposes, which is really exciting. I don't think that's yet confirmed, but it's in the bag. Good to hear. So that's the sort of thing that we really need to be working on. Any other questions?
You talked a lot about political pressures for that. Does your group or any other groups that you know of provide platforms for consumers, for support producers to put their voices and to support campaigns?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Can you repeat the question?
Can you have the microphone out?
Sure.
You talked a lot about different putting political pressure on things like CAP. Does Bristol Food Producers or any other groups that you're aware of provide a platform for consumers who want to support producers to engage with these campaigns that you're hoping to, I don't know if there already are campaigns that are going?
Some of you might know about Bristol Food Network. There are, if through becoming part of Bristol Food Producers as well as a local food supporter, you're kind of able to get your voice heard and sort of talk to producers that are involved with us as well. And there's other organisations like Land Workers Alliance, but I think that's more for growers themselves rather than sort of the general public. But definitely, I mean, we are about trying to work together collaboratively with people involved in local food in Bristol. So if any outsiders and local people want to get their views heard, then that's a mechanism for doing that, actually.
Governments aren't going to be changing policy if there's not a pressure from the public.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I mean, it's not just about pressure from us, but pressure from the public as well. But I think Bristol Food Network is more for the general public to get involved with that side of things.
Two things. One, what's really important is what Humphrey's doing, which is starting to talk about the money. I've been to so many food events where people never talk about this is how the finances work, and that's so important. Bristol Food Network has got a website, you can sign up for their email, it's a nice newsletter, and at the conference next Thursday, May the 5th at Old Market Assembly, the afternoon bit is the kind of activist session. We're launching a how-to guide. So in terms of political campaigning, it's quite complex, but I think Humphrey probably knows the most about it.
The organisation you're looking for, I'd say, is the food sovereignty movement, which essentially is the attempt to bring together consumer groups like health groups, farmers, all that stuff, into a united campaign about food sovereignty. Because of the nature of it, because it's disparate, as far as I understand it, it's a bit of a mess and it's slightly struggling. But they'll be the people that get involved.
Okay, thanks ever so much, everybody. We've got, I do want to draw it to a close now because we actually have run over. We've got the room now for until 12:30, so another 10 minutes if you want to get a drink. And I'm sure everybody's going to be hanging around for at least the next 10 minutes, so please talk to each other. And thanks ever so much, everybody who spoke today and joined in. Thank you.